This is AV SuperFriends Off the Rails, an almost regularly scheduled open discussion on audio and video in higher education. We'll sound off about our most brilliant ideas, our dumbest mistakes, and everything in between. And because this conversation will almost certainly go off the rails at some point, we'll end up covering just about everything else. And now, the AV SuperFriends. For March 19th, 2021, it's the AV SuperFriends Off the Rails. Well, welcome back, everybody. Time for another podcast adventure with the AV SuperFriends. My name's Chris Decter. I am joined by Justin, Mark, Jamie, and Larry. Rachel, unfortunately, has a prior engagement that came up at the last minute. That's not what that means, but she can't be here. So, for all you Rachel fans, you'll have to do without her for this episode. In Rachel's place, Justin is going to affect a falsetto for the entire episode to give you a little bit of Rachel's sarcastic attitude.
She did submit a very large script that Justin's going to read, so yes, that'll be nice.
Word for word, and it's in his contract. He has to maintain that. So,
I'm going to do my best.
Today's episode is a little different in the sense where we like to consider off the rails, but deliberately from the standpoint of we could go to multiple topics. However, we're going to try to stay on one topic-ish, but different aspects of that topic. So we're going to be talking all about 4K. Everything you ever wanted to know about 4K, we're going to talk about it on today's episode. But before we get into that, and maybe you picked this up from the title, we do have a slight format change for this podcast, where all episodes going forward are now going to be done entirely in Spanish. That is to say, ahora en español. So,
sí.
Esta noche presentamos con mucho gusto información interesante acerca de el 4K. El 4K es una resolución para su televisor con más de 8 millones de píxeles que nadie puede ver. Todos en este podcast están mintiendo. Pero primero, Jaime tiene preguntas sobre las cámaras. Jaime?
Das ist sehr nicht gut.
Porque 4K.
I only know German, so I don't know.
Yeah.
Not going to happen.
My minor in Spanish isn't going to help me here. And I'm pretty sure Chris cheated.
A little bit.
A little bit. But the gist of it is that I had a question about, 4K, which kind of started this whole thing. Not too long ago, I'm going to set this up. And I'm going to serve you guys a chance here in a minute. I'm going to serve you a chance to call me dumb. You don't really need more chances, but I'm going to let you, I'm going to serve this one up for you.
We'll take it.
Hello, my name's Jamie, and I'll be your waiter today. So a few weeks ago, a month or so ago,
It's a few weeks. We'll give you that.
Yeah, all the same, right? In my world, a few weeks could be 3 months or a year. So I was looking at action cams, right? Not a GoPro, because I'm too cheap for that. So all of the Chinese specials, and it kept popping up. Get your 4K action cam, and I kind of giggled a little bit at that. And then around that same time, I was catching up on my trade magazine reading, which I usually just open it up. I read some of it and then I delete it, so I never really remember where I'm at or which magazine it's in. I read an article about 4K cameras, which I was shopping for. And then I was online, and one of the nerds, CNET, Engadget, one of the consumer-ish thing, and they had a what do you need to know about working from home cameras? And I clicked on it, and it was all about 4K cameras. And so many of the arguments, I'll come back to the action cam thing, but many of the arguments that I was reading in these articles, and I'm sure a lot of sales brochures, the same thing, is, when you're working from home and you need a 4K camera because of all the things we understand, right? Most of the time, the more pixels, the better the picture. I know there's arguments here, right? But that's not the point. Supposedly the color reproduction's better. So, there's a myriad of reasons why it's a good idea to use 4K. And for me, I read through these and said, yes, technically all of those things are great, but I don't spec them very often. I don't specify them in my things. And when I ended up buying my $50 Chinese special action cam, yes, it had a 4K mode. And even though I had no intentions of ever using it, I tried a couple of things. I took it out and I let it record at 4K, And I think you guys all know what happened there is the memory card filled in 20 minutes. And then I was like, okay, just for giggles, I'm going to try to upload this to YouTube. And which took about 17 years because you guys know what my internet connection's like. And then YouTube crunched the living bejesus out of it, even though it was, quote, 4K. And I looked at it and I'm like, this is like all the reasons why I'm not sure 4K is a great idea for webcams or a great idea for a lot of the cameras that we specify in our systems. Because a lot of times they're just being pumped over USB, and a lot of times slow USB, not even the fast one, whichever version that is, and then crunch down, and the end user over Zoom or Teams or whatnot sees this itty bitty square of garbage. I mean, it's basically garbage at that point anyway. So I just don't do it very often. And I thought, am I crazy? Am I missing the boat here? And it made me think, I'm going to ask my fellow friends. I mean, outside of production environments where you have control over, everything and you really want a nice finished product, if some friend of yours came to you and says, I need a webcam, would you immediately go 4K? I mean, that's kind of where I was headed with this. I'm like, am I the only one that still thinks that you don't really, why? I think I would turn it down anyway. Why would I do that?
Well, and I think short answer, no. So thanks for joining us. We'll see you guys next week.
Been a good show.
Yeah. So the issue being, I think final use case, because I'll take a 720p or lower resolution camera with really nice lens on it any day before 4K because it's not getting you anything on a tiny webcam. Something that small is just not getting enough light in. It's not going to be great. So I think we look at use case, and we're on a Zoom call right now where the maximum resolution for any of us is 360p. So what's that matter? It's throwing all those pixels away. Now, yes, you can make the argument that it's doing some subsampling to take 8 pixels down to, or every 8 pixels goes down to 1. Is that right? If I did my math correctly, maybe more than that. So you're getting a softer edge on everything, and you're not seeing any diagonal jaggies or anything like that. So you're getting better general scaling, but no, I would say you don't need to go. So if your question is, do I need to go looking for 4K to buy a camera? The answer is no. I think the point, on the other hand, you're not going to be able to not find one. Before we get too far from that, I did want to mention I found this thing from a major manufacturer who I won't name, but it rhymes and spells exactly the same as Sony, who has some marketing material suggesting that if you're working
that one.
Yeah. There's some marketing material suggesting that if you're working from home, you would be better served than, instead of using the tiny little camera built into your laptop or a webcam that you might be using or whatever, you'd be better served using one of their 4K PTZs, which, it's going to give you a great picture. I guarantee you that, and no one's going to see it. So primarily what you're going to be paying for there is the lens and the ability to move the camera around. But once you set it, you're not really moving it much. So I don't know.
And I just know this argument's come up like Apple on their MacBooks. They still only put a 720 camera on it, and everybody bitches and moans about that. And I don't care for the most part. My in-laws bought a new laptop, and they're like, well, it's got a 4K camera on it. I'm like, so? I mean, what are you using it for? And, back to that action cam, I recorded stuff with the 4K, and then it has a 1080. Now, the 1080 actually on that action cam looked like crap. It was awful. But they have a 2K. They have a 2K option. And now it's not really 2K. It's 24 by 1080. And it's
What's
the best looking of the bunch.
On that sensor? I mean, it may be a weird. Is it like a 4:3 sensor or a 3:2 sensor or something?
Hey, buddy, I don't know what's in it.
Whatever it wants to be.
On aspect ratios now.
It literally cost me. It cost me $50. So.
Well, what I was getting at was whatever the native aspect ratio is, whatever's close to 1080 or 720 may look better, even though it's not like what our traditional presentation resolution, because it's doing some weird scaling to crunch that to 1920 by 1080, whereas whatever it is, 2400 by 2000, it's like, hey, that's my native, so I'm great with that. So that might be what you're seeing in there.
It may, I wouldn't doubt that, but again, Chinese special, I have no idea what the specs are, but it looks the best, and it has the best storage to picture ratio, right? Like that you can accept. And so, this grand thing, I I wasn't sure if I'm the only one that just peers at this and says, meh, I'm not excited by it.
You're a couple different pieces of this, right? It's you brought up the Zoom, the Teams, the whatever thing. Nobody is saying, hey, we're making the best thing ever, and by the way, we want you to just jam it through Zoom and Teams all the time. Like they're all about the capture side of it. That's their interest, is making sure they can capture the best thing ever.
Well, not this one from Sorny.
Sure, but
Not sure, Sorny.
The pipeline in which you're sharing and collaborating with is really at the back of their design criteria. They want it to be the best thing ever when it hits your computer, and yeah, it probably looks awesome. However, 9 times out of 10, we're using it in the closet / office / entry room / playroom / everything else room. We
Dining
also
room,
do,
thank you very much.
Yeah, and kitchen and bathroom and recording studio / K-12 teaching space. And so it's all those things, but that wasn't its sole purpose in design. It just so happened to be tricked into doing that.
And I think one thing we found, especially here at UNC Greensboro, storing all these recordings for all the Zoom classes, all the Panopto, everything is just taking up so much space. And we're not doing 4K, And so for us to actually take advantage of any of these cameras, there have to be so much thought put into the infrastructure and back end of this that we're just not there yet.
Yeah, and I think what really stood out to me is that these articles and the stuff that's being, the reason they're trying to sell stuff, to Chris's point, was for the work from home, right? For the wannabe YouTubers, for this and that, and I think there's a time and place for stuff, and I just wasn't sure. I thought maybe I was antiquating myself. I was starting to become that old guy that yells to get off my lawn.
I think it's that tool set that kind of does both things, but not specifically one.
Some of this has to do with those folks that think 4K is ultimately better. It's just like, Bowling Green's the home of the Corvette. We see a ton of Corvettes drove around the city. The average age is 9,000, right? These people are old that are driving around. They're going 30 miles an hour in a 50. It's like, why the hell did you buy a Corvette? Well, I just liked it. I don't know.
Got a better deal than a golf cart.
Another part of it is going to be the market, where this discussion, I think, in 1 year is going to be a moot point, and everything's going to be 4K. Just like go try and buy a TV that's, 1080p right now. You just can't do it. So, hopefully projectors get there too. But we're actually getting more complaints about, hey, this color, this red doesn't look red anymore. What happened? We need to replace our camera. And it goes back to USB crushing it. It's the Vadio bridges, or it's the old USB 2 stuff that is really killing image quality in our systems. And upgrading to a 4K camera is not going to help that.
Well, it sounds to me like I'm not terribly crazy here, and you guys haven't called me dumb yet, so.
No, Jamie, you're dead on. Let me go to like the far extreme here. So we're working on a project right now where we're building a big studio space for teaching classes and recording them and streaming them online. And early on, the discussion was, let's build this out to support 4K, even though none of the workflow supported that, none of the current use case supports that. But ultimately, a lot of these are going to end up on either a Zoom call, which means 360p of all things, or they may end up being recorded, as Larry mentioned, that eats up a lot of space. So we, as an institution, have turned the recording down to a maximum of 720p. You're not getting any more than that ever, because you don't need it and people aren't looking at it anyway, and they're going to squeeze it down to a little window in the corner of their laptop on their 13-inch laptop screen, and they're going to, while they're watching YouTube or something. So even if
twice
you are
the speed,
and they're set it to 2x. So even if you are set up for 4K, no one's seeing it at that. Now, the argument made here, and it's deliberate, is that in a studio space, the archival footage could be recorded at 4K. And yes, that capability will be there. No one will ever see that. They probably won't even be editing in native 4K sort of thing. So,
but that's the broadcast capture side of it. And you specifically excluded that from this use case. Yeah. And so I think that it's always best practice to capture at the best rate you possibly can. Give me more of those pixels up front.
We wanted to make sure that the cameras were capturing accurate color and good bit depth. And so the picture at its source looked as good as possible. It's like a 1-inch sensor on these cameras, so it's a big sensor that's grabbing a lot of light, and it's going to look really nice. No one's going to see that on their Zoom call because it gets dialed down immediately. But starting with a better source image will get you a better product at the far end. But it's massively overbuilt. At the end of the day, I will just say it'll be massively overbuilt for the way it will get used 90% of the time. It's that 10% where you're going to get a much better product. So, Jamie, to your initial question, are you crazy to tell people they don't need 4K? No, because no one's seeing it at that. The sensors are tiny and there's a high compression rate, and it's not great. It's not gaining them anything. So probably, but to Justin's point, you can't not get a 4K anything.
Yeah.
So grab that, dial it down a couple of settings, and that's at least you got something. So
I like to tell people that way they can capture their ugliness in its full glory.
Yeah, I mean, if you're camera shopping and camera A is 1080 and it's, let's just say it's a webcam, it's $150, and the next version up, which is newer, it's got newer components, but it's 4K, is $200. That's probably worth buying the newer, better camera, not just because it's 4K, but probably because it's made better anyway. So, just kind of be aware of what you're buying and what you're doing with this camera, this 4K stuff, right?
That's right. What's the use case? How are you actually going to use this thing day in, day out? I think that
it's a bigger number, so it's better.
Bigger. It looks better.
Yeah, easy to market.
Yep.
It's 4 of the Ks.
It's got the logo on it.
4Ks, yeah.
It's just not 1K, it's 4Ks.
Well, and that's interesting aside from the marketing, when they switch from 1080p, that's a big number, to 4K. You're like, wait, 4? From 1080?
This has more digits.
Yeah.
It's got to be
that
more.
It's smaller, right? And then like, oh, well, it's 4,000. So 4,000 is more. Then you got to explain aspect ratios, and we swap from vertical measurements to horizontal measurements. And it's not actually 4K because it's 38. Yeah.
Just pay for it. Just give me the money. That's all.
I guess next time I come up with a question, it'll be I'll try to make it easier for you to call me dumb. In the meantime, I guess we got to step away for a moment. Then when we come back, I'm sure I'll say something even dumber when we talk more about 4K. As many of you know, the Super Friends have always been better received when we have more input from you. So, here's your chance. Send us a note at mailbag@avsuperfriends.com and get involved with the show. We're looking for some topics to discuss, some fellow nerds to talk to, or just general AV awesomeness to brag about. But remember, we'll probably steal your ideas. And I suppose we'd take some criticism, but that wouldn't be very nice. Anyway, drop us a note at mailbag@avsuperfriends.com and find out how quickly we ask you to join this nonsense.
All right, well, welcome back. So today's topic is 4K. We're going all 4K all day, 4K all day. So one quick note, the show title, Porque, this is an ongoing joke from years ago when we talked about, we did want to create a Spanish language podcast. This probably was, I don't know, Marco, was this 2015 or something? Spanish language podcast entirely about, should we start looking at 4K in classroom spaces? And this was years ago, but go Spanish language, so we can call it Porque, because that was amusing to me for no reason. So 4K, is this a thing, and are we just going to get forced into it? So a moment ago we were chatting as we were setting up our recording, and I was admonished for wasting show material while we weren't recording. So I'm going to repeat everything I just said. So the first thing I want to bring up on 4K is the market is moving, manufacturers that is, are moving to most of their manufacturing to the point where you're not able to get non-4K items. And I was quickly jumped on by several people say, yes, you can get non-4K displays, dummy. Stop saying that. So I will make a correction. For the most part, if you're buying a general purpose display, those are all now 4K. Specialized displays, especially in digital signage and video walls and things of that ilk, a lot of those are still 1080p. And I remember this from last summer when I spec'd in, how many did we have in there? 27 monitors for several video walls in a single project. They were all 1080p across the board. Now, granted, the overall video wall, the array is much higher resolution than that, but the individual panels were 1080. Now, most likely that's for lower power draw, because these are going to be staying on 16, 24 hours a day. A lot of them also, because they're doing remote power, so they want to get those as low as possible, and so there's kind of specialized. But I will still, put my flag in the ground on the, General purpose displays, for the most part, the vast majority are 4K only. So even though you may not be setting up your AV system for 4K, the display is going to be 4K. And Justin, you mentioned this a little bit ago, that we're kind of getting pushed into 4K, even though we may not actually be using it.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the displays that we're using right now, the only time I run into 1080p displays is shopping for video walls. Even our digital signage are 4K. I don't really know if we're running 4K resolution or not on digital signage. I'm not creating the content. So I'm just curious as to when projectors are going to get there.
No, they're not.
Wait, what?
Because PowerPoint is still PowerPoint is still XGA.
1024 by 768.
Well,
The best.
yeah, unless you've updated. No, what's funny is that PowerPoint.
We had a $1 billion
enough,
signage system, and everybody made their shit in PowerPoint, and so you get a 4K display, and it sure as hell it had XGA. I'm sorry.
and the 5x4 or whatever aspect ratio it is.
Off the rail. Sorry, go back.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Well,
Rewind it.
the thing is about the projectors is they're still behind. And I have a theory here. I believe that the people that make projectors just cannot get away from 1610. And so there's not a
It was a simple clerical
4K
error.
equivalent
Instead of putting
to
the point there,
1610.
they ordered too many.
So
There's warehouses full of
they're washing
1610
their hands of
chipsets.
this shit. They're done with it. It's like, we're going to stick to 1610. We're not going to move from this. And that's what we're doing. I don't know why the projectors aren't 4K. That's just my theory.
Got containers full of them, and we got to get through them before we switch over. So, my bad.
Maybe so. But it kind of, it drives us mad with EDID, right? Signal transport is kind of a pain because when we do a lot of Zoom rooms and you've got a projector and a few displays in a room and everybody's looking at, that's the main reason why we're, pushing 1610 or 16.9 everywhere. Excuse me, 16.9. We are using 16.9. And
From this
it just
point
makes for
forward,
better
I would like for you to use the decimal, please. The 1.77.
Yeah.
No,
Repeating.
that takes math. I don't do math. I'm just an AV guy. So, does
thing
anybody
there's
have
no
an
math in
answer on
AV.
when we're going to see these projectors? Is it just like a chip thing? Is it too costly?
Yeah, and the weird thing is,
them. It's
like
just higher
every
end
manufacturer there are these high end projectors. And now there are some that are available, but for the most part, those mainline, kind of the reverse of the displays, those mainline general purpose LCD and LED panels are all 16.9 and 4K. There's specialized ones that are 1080p. On the projectors, it's like the mainline ones are 1080p, not 4K, and there are 4K ones. Either weirdly enough, it's like very low end ones and very high end ones.
WUXGA.
Yeah.
Yeah,
1610.
and
So
you
why
remember
is that though? But why?
But a couple of years ago, do you remember when 4K projectors were becoming a thing? And we all gave them shit, right? We were all like, "You're just flashing the little DLP mirror twice. You're not really making 4K." And DLP said, "Yes, but we have the new, what is it? Was it the 1.2 inch chip? And it was truly a 4K DLP chip. That thing's not coming out. And it's been 3-4 years. And it's just not hitting products that aren't below the Ultra, right? The movie theater
Large venue,
experience.
right? The large venue
Yeah.
ones.
And I just can't believe that at this point in time, that chip, in particular, that chip, hasn't gotten out there more. It's the
Must be
same
a
with
power issue or something, so it only works in larger chassis or something. I don't know.
yeah,
I
and
guess,
the LCD
possibly.
model, with all the little LCD chips. Why aren't we pushing the boundaries with those? It is really strange, and me and my pocket engineering degree says that it should be easy. I looked it up on Google once, so it's good. It's good.
You're
But
certified.
here's the thing. Going to our sciencey math designer brains here, you put 4K in a classroom, what do you need? You need a really big screen and really tall ceilings.
Yeah.
So why...
You need an
maybe it's a
EDIT
power
table
issue.
to
Maybe
bring
the
it back
power-
down to 1080p.
Yeah,
Why is power issue
720p.
it's a lot of wasted
why
overhead.
is the TVs getting 4K first and not the projectors, which create bigger images, right? So why would you need a 4K image on it, minus the home market,
It's
right?
all the home market.
where it comes from.
That's what drives it. It's people see 4K, they think they need it, even though they're sitting on their couch where they can't tell a difference. And that drives the glass manufacturer, and that drives where we get all of our stuff from.
But they have to have a chipset that pushes 4K in the TVs. Why can't you replicate that technology as cheap for the projectors? That's my thing. Kind of like what Jamie's point, the pocket engineering degree. Like that chip should work in that thing too.
Well, when they were all calling you 4 or 5 years ago and you were talking about what do you want to see in your product line coming up, we all stressed we want to see laser. We were all hell-bent that we never wanted to change a bulb again. So they put all their R&D to getting that laser thing worked out for us. And got to admit, they did that, and it's nice. Everything is laser. And so now, are we content with laser? And now it's like, okay, you know what? The next problem I want you to solve is 4K. Is that where we are now? I mean,
I think it's a problem that I don't need solved right now. I think that's my
I'm with
point.
Jamie.
It's same with the rest
for
of you.
different reasons. I want to solve it to ease the EDID backplane to kind of have that commonality of signal flow. I'm not trying to get 4K.
I'm dialing everything down to 720 anyway. It doesn't matter to me.
I think here recently we did a science and engineering building, right? And we put this whole thing in, and I have one active learning space where the engineers stressed that we want 4K displays because we're going to group think CAD and Revit and the BIM models and things. And I said, you know what, that's a fantastic choice. And I have 18 displays in here, and only 2 people are sitting next to them, so we're good to go. And then they said, we want a projector. And I said, okay, but I'm going to turn the projector off every time you want to display those. What?
You need a table where it senses it and says, you don't get projector. You're not mature enough for that.
Basically, it's, once you try to force it to the projector, it just, and they, after they saw it once, you demonstrate it once, they're like, oh. And then my other argument was, why do we even need a projector? Because you've got 18 4K displays, 2 people per display. What the hell are we doing here? But they
you also
had
run
to have
into a scenario where they're going to say they're going to start calling you, say the image on the projector doesn't look as good as the ones that I'm sitting 2 feet away from. And you're like, yeah, it doesn't. Congratulations, it's physics.
Yeah, I mean, you're always going to have the arts and the sciences where we can agree those are probably good candidates and need to have higher resolution for the work they're doing. And it's content driven, right? Content is king here, and it makes sense. But I think for the mass, it's just kind of why. You guys, you've said it before, look at that content that they bring in the masses. Black text on white background, 4x3 PowerPoint all day long. So in a common room. So what do we need? Does that need to be in 4K? I mean, it's going to look sweet.
Well, the other element is, the other item is element size. I mean, so if you are giving them true 4K, which is, I guess, we probably should have clarified. We're talking, I think, home compatible friendly 4K Ultra HD at what, 3840 by 2160, something like that. Not 4K DCI resolution. Yeah. I get it.
The resolution auditors are listening to this show.
Someone right now is probably yelling.
Yeah, they're already blowing us up on Twitter. You idiots! It's not real 4K unless it's Rec 2020.
But that's the point. We don't care right now.
Yeah, but if you give them either of those, and they start displaying things, and here's my regular file. I'm just going to bring up my text document or whatever it is. Here's my Word doc, or I'm going to load up Canvas and we're going to look at that. The image, the detail, the text is too small for anybody to read at any decent distance, so it doesn't do you any good. And Justin, you did mention, hey, if you go 4K, you need a massive display for that to
it's
be.
It's easy. No, you don't need to. You just change the 100% to 500% on your desktop, and then fixes
this argument comes up every time.
Yeah.
Especially Windows now will detect if you have a resolution higher than, I think, 1440p, and autos, maybe even doesn't lower than that.
200?
It auto scales to 125, 150 or 200%. Like automatically. You don't even get a choice. It just does that, which is nice in the sense where now you're getting 4 pixels for every one sort of thing. So it's doing some nice scaling and looks real nice.
Do you remember where that came from?
Remember where what came from?
Oh, quiz show. Jeopardy.
That Windows thing that you're talking about?
Because Windows sucked at it for years?
Well, they did. When they came out with the first Surface tablet, right? That was the selling point. It's 4K, right? It's 4K, but it ran regular
Surface
Windows.
Wasn't 4K. Surface was not.
It was some weird
it was
ratio.
aspect ratio at a weird resolution, like 3,000 by 4,000 sort of thing.
It exported it because the guys at Sexton and some of the other, they gave them primary things and they plug it in and it defaulted to 4K. And they couldn't use them. because you couldn't, they were, 12-inch tablets
Yeah,
and you couldn't use them. And that's how Windows fixed it.
Yeah.
They were like, oh yeah, well, we fixed it. And it came in and they just pushed it across the board.
I'll buy that story that Microsoft made, and they did. The first Surface had a very small screen, 10 or 12 inch, you're right, and a very high resolution screen, so it looked nice. But yes, by default, when Windows loaded that, just the Windows operating system loads in, now your text is micro tiny. So I can absolutely see them saying, all right, in our next patch, let's rev this and just all these things scale to 125, 150%. But what I was getting at was, if I give someone true ultra high resolution display, and Windows sees that and immediately kicks it back to 200%. Well, they're functionally getting dialed back to 1080 anyway, so they're not seeing that. So the picture looks nicer, but they're not seeing the resolution. So kind of what's the point? So we're kind of defeating ourselves going through this process. So
you probably all had that experience, and I think the real issue when you look at instructors in spaces and they're teaching, and they've all had this material they've been using for how many years. And we've all seen them like, we want to have a really beautiful high resolution screen in this space, and it's going to be multifunctional. And then the first day of class, they put up their 320, 240 video, and it pops up on a little tiny box in the middle of the screen. You're like, well, why is that always so small? And when I stretch it, it looks like crap. Can you fix that for me? And it's like, well, it's doing what you asked it to do. And obviously these ones that have been teaching for the last 30 years, guess what? They go, they talk to their dean. They need to fix the AV system in here. It makes all my slides look like crap, and here we are, right? And it's like, well, what are we solving for? The fact that your content's bad, or the fact that the room's nice? Like, where's the problem?
Mark, earlier you had said when we asked the projector manufacturers to develop lasers, they did a really good job and they solved that problem. Now, do we want to ask them to solve the 4K? Well, just a question to the group, and this is probably off the topic, but if I gave you the choice of solving the 4K projector problem or integrating AV over IP into the projector problem, which problem is a bigger...
AV over IP.
Which would give us the biggest gain right now? Because I don't see 4K in a standard classroom as a need at all.
Well, see, I think Panasonic did a really good job of integrating HD-based and we've standardized on Panasonic. Not promoting them, but it's just so... My mind's past that. That's a very good point, Larry. I just, like I said before, want that 4K commonality backplane so I don't have to deal with ED-ID issues. But yeah, implementing HD-based T on all projectors, that would be great. Even expanding that to NDI or some other stuff in the future would be awesome as well.
I mean, I would take NDI integrated in a projector right now over
there's people stomping
else.
and crying and screaming at their stereos right now. You can't do that. The HDCP is not going to let you do that. And so
they'll figure it out.
Yeah, exactly.
Just let some
break it.
engineer figure it out and math it out.
They put SDI on projectors. That doesn't support it either.
There you go.
You know what? I have a use case where nobody's even noticed.
Exactly. Yet.
I'm now 3 weeks in, and not one person has noticed that particular issue.
Well. And it's
how
kind
you
of implement that NDI stuff, not to get off track there, but if you're just peeling it straight from a computer, you're kind of, NDI bypasses HDCP a little bit.
Yeah, but it's not 4K.
Don't tell them that.
Don't tell us
they're
secrets.
listening, man. Come on now.
Well, that does bring up the next, Larry's question does lead into this too. You're still got this bandwidth problem, right? It doesn't matter, because we still have to get it, whether it's an HDMI cable, which we all know there are certain HDMI cables that just will not pass it, or streaming of some sort, even though you can technically get 4K Netflix and 4K YouTube and 4K. Like, I just had the experience where I uploaded a 4K thing and they squashed the living bejesus out of it. And so, we still have a bandwidth issue. We still have to get... I don't know, is it 18 gigabits per second?
Yep. 18.28 or something. Yeah.
Yeah, it's and my math, that's going from memory. I could sit down and schedule it out, but who was talking about, I think Larry, you were talking about, you guys just did a esports.
Yeah, we're in the process of doing an esports thing, and it was one that's being designed outside contractor, and I'm just kind of helping to oversee the project and that kind of thing. But
you mean fixing their problem?
Not yet. I've been impressed with this group so far. But it's been interesting because I grew up video games, so I thought, okay, esports, not a big deal. I'm learning so much on this project. I thought it would be all about ultra high res images so the person can see every little detail. They don't care. The entire $1 million complex is 1080p, but it's at 240 frames a second. And so we still need that 18
it's
gigabit
still a big pipeline,
backplane.
yeah.
But 1080p is the resolution the entire thing runs on. It was an eye-opening experience for me because it doesn't change the pipeline at all. And so if we have that pipe, is resolution where we want to spend it? Is it bit depth? Is it sampling? Like, we only have so much of a pipe. What really makes the difference in the image quality?
So I love that e-game and esports kind of example because every university that's doing it, like it becomes the bleeding edge of what they can do, and it's a perfect example of kind of pushing the best of all the things we do. The audio, the video, the communications, the network, it's everything. And you just drop it down and people are like, what in the hell is going on here? And to get your mind around all the different signal flow, it's crazy. And I think, it's the resolution, and even the esports I've seen, nobody said we want esports and it has to be 4K all the way through. It's got to be 4K capable as far as putting a 4K input into it, but it does not have to deliver it to the end.
Yeah, and that's not something I've dealt with directly, but I think that, so Larry, to your description there, they're playing their games at 1080, or are they, as Mark said, they're playing their games higher resolution and then it gets scaled down for display?
They play their games at 1080 because the competitors on the stage, the frame rate is what really helps them. If they see jaggeds or things between frames, and not that smooth image, it takes them longer to recognize shapes. So it's all about how many frames per second can I get on the screen.
Yeah, that's the human consumption piece of it, right? They want to see it as close to real time and real raster as possible.
And the second most important thing to them is bit depth because they need to see differences in color. Resolution comes in third.
It's interesting. So, Mark, I don't remember what the project was, but the one you and I worked on several years ago where we rebuilt that old TV studio space. Mm-hmm. And that was the first time that because it was a specialized space, we were deliberately putting in 4K monitors at 4K and ran into an issue with the cabling that we had, not always supporting it at full color and full frame rate. I think a bunch of the cables we had by default were 4K cables and listed as such, and then we found out that, well, no, they're 4K at, was it 422 at like 30 frames per second at 8-bit color?
It's not full. You can't.
So
go full.
We were seeing these weird hitching issues, and that was like a day and a half of troubleshooting to figure that one out. But these are the things that start to add up when you're not looking at the overall bandwidth of the system, and you're just looking at the single number of, look, it's 4K, there it is, but it wasn't quite the same. And ran into that, and had to we overnetted some cables or something to get that fixed, sort of thing. So those numbers add up real quick. And I mean, at IU a couple of years ago ran into a similar issue where I went through all our HDMI cables one by one, and annoyingly, a major manufacturer who lists the cables with the same exact part number. They look the same. There's no physical way to know what bandwidth the cables are capable of. We had to go through one by one and identifying which ones are what were they called? High speed HDMI, I believe, which was primarily 1080 and some slightly higher, but wouldn't do like a 4K 60, 444 at 8-bit color, etc. It just didn't have the bandwidth to do it. So we had to identify a bunch of these cables and say, you can use some of these cables in some scenarios. In a general classroom, it's fine. You need to go swap a cable, drop that one in, you're good. But in these higher end ones, if you start using these cables, we may not be using higher resolution and higher frame rates now. But if our entire pathway doesn't support, the entire signal chain doesn't support that higher resolution or higher transport all the way through, higher bitrate transport, we're going to run into an issue 5 years from now and find out it's the one cable between this box and that box, which is causing a problem all the way through. So it gets to be a real pain when you have kind of mixed capable cables and transmitters and receivers, and it's just not great. And Justin, you had mentioned the problem with kind of crunching those EDID tables and doing the math now because it'll bite you down the road.
Oh yeah, I had a stupid problem, and it was one of those Homer Simpson dough moments. So just kind of like what you were saying, Chris. I put in an AV over IP solution in my house that was capable. It says in the specs, 4K full, all that good stuff at 60 hertz. I'm like, oh, this is great. So I'm going to be able to do this in my house and do this and this and this. I have an old 8x2 matrix switcher from company X that does 4K. I'm like, perfect. So I can put 2 encoders after the 2 outputs of that matrix switch, have all my stuff behind that switcher, and be able to do all kinds of matrix routing through the AV over IP solution. Got it all set up, and it was like on my Apple TV when I said do 60 hertz at 4K. It just keeps shitting itself. I'm like, what is going on? And I forgot about that HDMI switch that's 4K that could only do 30 hertz, right? And so nothing worked the way I want. And I had to go all the way back down to 1080p because trying to run an Apple TV at 30 hertz looks like shit on a 4K TV. So just because everything's 4K doesn't mean that EDID completely goes away. It just becomes a little easier, but it's definitely not plug and play. I assure you that, because I spent
just
a day
more to be aware of for sure.
Yeah, I just spent a day just thinking, just doing this, just what the hell did I do wrong?
Just sitting there.
Looking at
Just
numbers.
sitting there. Like I'm looking at all these numbers, and I looked at 30 and I looked at 60, but it never rung, right? So just be
or you'll
aware
get
of what
those
you're doing.
weird things where you don't realize you have it set to 10-bit color, and some displays will do 10-bit
just
color,
something
and others
weird.
will only do 8. And so you're like, why things look weird, and the signal keeps dropping out because it keeps trying to re-handshake
It's handshaking, yeah.
Yep, and you'll be chasing that around for a couple hours till you realize, wait a minute, one device in the signal chain somewhere is set to 10-bit color or 8-bit, whatever it is, and you change that. Oh, one device is set to 422 and it's not scaling properly. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it becomes a real, and we're guilty of. I think we spent the last 30 minutes just mentioning 4K. In fact, it's the title of this episode. 4K, as if that's the one thing we're looking at, and really it's not. There's all these other elements that we need to consider that we're not looking at them. So, and Larry, your point about the refresh rate thing is, that's surprising to me. I mean, I know that 1440p is a very popular resolution. I didn't realize they were 1080, but if I can do higher frame rate at a lower resolution, that's better than a higher resolution at a slightly lower frame rate, because
speaking of 1440p, like the people were saying that the ideal situation is 1440p at 240, but that pipeline is huge.
It's huge, huh?
So that's what you're doing then, right? You're just like, oh, we got to throw out this brand new building and do it again.
Yeah, get rid of the
Doing
building.
it wireless, right?
Oh yeah,
Just
all wireless.
everything's wireless now.
Well, I
Like
hear if
through
you
the
have 5G,
microwaves.
you're good. 5G, you're good. Don't worry about it.
I've had people ask that question because I think we all do. We have various versions of a wireless transmission system, or for sending your laptop to the screen sort of thing. We all use different ones. But I've had people ask that question of like, oh, does this do 4K? Like, first of all, no, that display doesn't even do it. Secondly, that's turned down. And thirdly, why? What are you doing? So yeah,
It's always that
frames per second or
casual
something?
inquiry. Oh, this does 4K, right? Not as if they had something in their back pocket that they needed to get 4K up there, but they just inquire it. So
It just sounds
it's good,
better.
right? Yeah, I'm hip. I know what's going on.
Well, and maybe that goes back to Jamie's original question, because what that person is actually asking is, 4K that's a thing, and you guys are doing it. So maybe I should should I buy a 4K TV? And Jamie asked a question: should I get a 4K camera? Sure, why not?
Yeah.
Go nuts.
Or
It
maybe they're just
looks-
asking if the equipment's new. Like, is that 4K? Oh, it's new. It smells new, right?
This is 5K. We're doing 5K now. Well, 5K is a thing too. Damn it! So can't make
Yeah.
that joke anymore. We're doing 7K. Is 7K a thing? There's probably a 7K something.
No, they
7.5.
skipped it and
I
went straight to
haven't
8.
seen 7.
There's probably something up
Coming.
there.
There's a
Someone-
trade show
No,
somewhere.
They
The
went
booth.
straight
I
to
like
8.
to hang out at Costco and just laugh at the people looking at the 8K monitors.
Are there 8K monitors at Costco now? Seriously?
I think
Yeah.
I saw an 8K monitor there, and it's like, come on.
They're
like,
starting to get imported now. The 8K ones
Yeah.
are. Now in Japan, you're good to go, right? Because
oh yeah, they have content.
they're already
and content's
broadcasting
king.
in
Are they
4.
actually-
So
Okay, so they are broadcasting in 8 now. Is that the thing?
no, well, they broadcast in 4, and then I think you can subscribe to. But it's Japan. They get to do fun things.
It's the future in Japan. So yeah, literally.
Yeah, it'll get here eventually. But
in about 10 hours.
that and mini discs and but anyway, which I love mini discs.
You
But
remember mini discs? Yeah.
one of my favorite mediums. But yeah, that 8K is a thing, and I don't get it. I'm like, what are you gonna play? what are you putting on there besides bragging rights? It's kind of like going
Well,
fishing.
maybe that's our response about 4K is when people ask, are we doing 4K? No, we'll drag our feet long enough and we'll just jump straight to 8. We don't have
think it
content for
goes
that
back-
either, but you know.
A lot of this goes back to that. Well, I see you're buying a Corvette. You plan on driving it in 160? No, I'm not. Okay. You just want to tell people you have an 8K TV. That's great.
I
Well, I
like
guess
I like the articles this week. Sorry, one more thing. I like the articles this week where the Sony, what's their liquid wall or their massive
crystal LED.
crystal LED massive walls. They're starting to put them into the high rise penthouses and things in New York and LA. I'm like, oh my god! And like, what are you doing?
Well, so we have 2 of those on campus. One went in deliberately for a very specialized kind of high-end space. So it was a wow factor deliberately because it's in the lobby of the building, kind of like that same video wall and block. It's that same idea. But one went into a smaller conference room, and it was kind of, all right, someone has some funding for this, and this is going in. But to the resolution question, it's a 1080p display. So it's not even super high resolution. It still looks great because it's 1080 with nice scaling and all that. It's got a nice processor behind it. But I think it's 100 inches, and you could have gone with other options for far cheaper. But it was designed because they wanted that wow factor. So when the right people see that, they appreciate where the funding went to. Now, I think we'll see LEDs go much more widespread in years coming up, but it's not there yet. So. Well, to the initial question of this episode, Porque 4K, we've discussed a lot of why you might look at that. We've got one more item to discuss, but before then, let's take a quick break.
There's a great new digital magazine from Higher Ed AV Media found at higheredav.com, and we do a special monthly show where we actually stay on topic. It's a show where we try to really focus on a single topic and break it down into AV SuperFriends style. That's AV SuperFriends on topic, found at avsuperfriends.com, higheredav.com, iTunes, Amazon, Spotify, Google, and wherever else you get your podcasts from. So we're back. We're going to talk about what resolutions we're going to discuss in our classrooms. And I think that I'm going to push the envelope a little bit. We've standardized on 720. And I think we're going to start seeing a little 1080p in some classrooms that I might design, maybe with a little zooming on the desktop to increase the icon size so everybody can read it. But we'll see what happens. Larry?
I've put some thought into this, and you know how when you see 2 things, if one of them looks substantially better than the other one, it makes the other one look worse.
Yeah.
I'm designing everything at 360p. That way, everyone's Zoom looks as good as the rest of their content.
So you're really lowballing things here, and you're just shooting for the lowest possible common denominator.
If that is the best it looks in any room, it will be what they expect.
Yeah. And then, so when everybody says, well, this looks like shit in this room, you're like, well, does it look like shit on your iPhone? Like, yeah, well, there you go.
They spend a year looking at Zoom calls. They'll think it looks fine.
Input equals output.
All right. I like it. Mark?
I fear that we have a wave of 1080 minimum requests coming. So I'm looking at because people are at home consuming that right now, just on their computers. And I think we're opening up the EDID tables and allowing some more of that to pass through. It's not going to be pretty in a lot of spaces, but for the most part, I think we're going to make do with it, and we'll have some adequate screen sizes. But I think moving forward, we're definitely saying, okay, people have matured to the point where maybe they're aware of resolutions and what their computers might be set on. I might be shooting myself in the foot with that, but I'm hoping that we, as a society, can get to 1080 as an agreed upon usable resolution.
Yep, I'm there with you. Jamie?
So I had monitor issues this week. I've been changing my desk around, and I unplugged my monitor, and when I put it back up, it wouldn't power on, which naturally led me down the path of I'll shop for a new monitor, and I've been inspired. 32:9. Doing it. Extron, we're an Extron campus. Extron now has their 32:9 touch panel. I can do 2 projectors edge blended, 32 by 9.
That's a thing.
I can get widescreen things. I'm done. I'm in 32 by 9.
I like
that's
that.
My new
I
that's
wanted
my
to say
New
that-
Year's
that-
resolution.
That was good. That's probably the most realistic higher res thing we're going to see requests for before we ever get to 4K.
You guys keep
That
talking
makes
about aspect
sense.
ratios, not
Oh,
resolution.
I know, but still,
Yeah, but I can't. I'm not going to do the math right now. So
yeah.
something by something, but it's 32 by 9
How many
aspect
pixels?
ratio.
Dark
if you're going
side.
wider, how many pixels vertically then? Because that's the question.
It's, whatever.
I have one question for you,
curved.
Jamie.
And
I have
curved.
one question. Where the hell are you going to put your whiteboards in front of the room in classrooms?
Well, when I
Whiteboards
curve the
are
screen
32 by
around,
9.
Whiteboards.
It's in the cloud, man. It's all in the cloud.
Whiteboards. There's no room for
done.
whiteboards.
4 by 1, it's 16 to.
You
It's a
said,
document camera.
what's
That's a
my
document
New
camera.
Year's resolution? And I haven't
And
done
you
any
still haven't
projects in
answered.
this new year. My New Year's resolution is 32 by 9.
I like it.
Which is an
32
aspect ratio,
pixels.
not a resolution.
32 pixels by 9
okay, I got
pixels.
you. All right. So
There.
you're going
Tiny.
all out
Jesus.
for a total of what, 280 some pixels, something like that?
Well, if Larry can go to 360, I can go to 270, and VHS is the new content provider.
If we
Going-
follow the
going
market
interlaced.
on vinyl, yes, VHS is coming back.
Going all interlaced now. It's going to be great.
It's all cyclical, right?
Chris, what about you?
Yeah, so I'm going to do a typical weasel answer. I would say, and Mark, you mentioned it. I would still want to do everything at 720 because that's where people can actually read stuff from farther than 8 feet away from the screen at the front of the room, sort of thing. And we're going more and more LCD, replacing projection, just because it's to the point where it's almost a straight swap cost, but the screens get smaller, and if they get smaller, I want lower resolution so people farther away can read it. But I will make sure that the systems are such that they can support 1080, and hell, they can probably support 4K because it's hard to not do that these days. But by default, I want that stuff at, I've said it many times, I want 720p and mono audio everywhere. It solves so many issues. And the people are there to consume classroom content or somebody on Zoom. Like Larry said, Zoom's at 360, so why does it matter? But yeah, my New Year's
you
resolution
push-
is the same as it was the last 10 years.
Can you push your 720p at 480 hertz?
Yes, at 480 hertz. So that PowerPoint looks fantastic. Look how fast those pixels change. It's amazing. So it makes the gamers in the classroom very happy. So,
Well, it's a thing.
well, there we go. That's 4K from the AV SuperFriends.
Yeah, hope you enjoyed it. It was
We
you learned
probably
everything you
didn't
needed
actually-
to learn, right?
Did we answer that question of 4K 4K? I don't think we did.
Don't use
maybe
it in classrooms. That's the answer.
Yet.
Yeah,
Or
just
just
plan
yet.
for it, but maybe it's not there yet.
Convince
You're
the
good.
architects
your
to make
ceilings.
higher roofs. Yeah, the ceilings.
Start
4K.
making
your ceilings higher.
20-foot high ceilings, and we could talk.
Well, we've managed to ruin yet another episode of AV SuperFriends Off the Rails. You can contact us with questions, topic ideas, or general complaints at mailbag@avsuperfriends.com. If you complain loud enough, we might just invite you on the show.
Nice work, everyone. Sharp broadcast. Really good. Everyone on the floor as well. Really a lot of hustle. I liked it.
The opinions expressed by the AV SuperFriends are solely those of the individuals and do not represent their respective institutions, organizations, companies, or clients.
welcome back. So the group has asked me to either talk about COVID some more, or we're going to talk about New Year's resolutions in March, and it's March Madness. So I picked New Year's resolutions for some reason. So we're going to do a little bit of a lightning round. I'm going to go first, and my New Year's resolution is going to be designing more lean, meaning you've heard me talk about this. Everybody's challenging me at work to design things with less boxes and less price. And if you actually did that, those counterweight each other, and it's actually hard to do. So I've been collecting metrics in my designs and focusing on that, and we'll see where it goes. Larry, New Year's resolution.
Oh, crap. I thought we were talking about actual resolutions.
Yeah, so Justin, you missed the joke. We may want to start this one over.
Did you really fucking...
Like
was the
720p versus
Yeah.
480 versus 360, which you're being a Zoom campus,
took
you
it
should just
literally.
design everything
No,
360p.
I would say just start over, and it's literally what is your preferred resolution, because that's the follow-up question.
Holy shit.
In a new space, what are you designing for? So,
We
You
should
know
keep
how
this in the
fucking
show, by the
stupid
way.
I feel right now. I was like,
way,
why are
this-
we talking about
This
New
is
Year's
going at the end of the
resolutions in
show,
March?
just so we
And
know.
you guys,
this is
this
gonna
is
be very
outtakes.
secret
This
track.
is
yeah.
outtakes right here.
so that's why we have a document with all this stuff in it, by the way. If you
This
wanted to
is
open
such
that up.
that's such a Justin thing to do. I'm an idiot. I'm sorry, y'all.
We just added editing to Mark.
Bring us
I was
back
like
in and just
sitting
do it
there
again.
Why are we talking about New Year's resolutions?
Here, I'll put it in. I'll
Like,
put it in the
alright,
Zoom
we'll do
chat.
it. All right.
Yes.
Use that as your. It was your idea. You brought it up like
Oh,
2 weeks
man.
ago.
Oh, dude, I don't know what I did yesterday, man. I got a lot going on, like everybody else, but my memory is
Apparently,
really short.
shrooms.
Wow.
No, that was in college.
He's thinking about his video walls. What he's thinking about.
No, I'm thinking about this AutoCAD shit I got to do by. This
Re-rack
weekend.
it. All right, let's do it. Come on.
All right.